everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Because She Can series. I am so excited because today I have a very special guest. I would like to introduce Andolyn Medina, who is our Miss District of Columbia 2021. Welcome, Andolyn.
Thank you for having me, Hannah. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you because not only is Andolyn Miss D.C, but she's also a student pursuing her doctorate in psychology, and she is also a commissioned naval officer. So you got a lot going on, girl. That's a lot on your plate.
It is. It's a busy time at all times.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think I want to start the conversation with how you're doing as Miss D.C. You were crowned about 4 months ago, and it looks like you've been really busy. What has the experience been like so far for you?
It has been a lot of fun. And I think something that, when we talk about timing, it feels like really great timing. I often think about, the stuff that I'm doing now as Miss DC, and I think about where I was at like 18 or 19. And I'm like, there's no way I could have been able to do that now as Miss DC. And so what Miss DC looks like is a year that every Miss DC gets to create. So we sort of don't have any standard appearances in the way that other state organizations may have, meaning that everything that we get by ourselves and we make it our own. And so that has been something that has been really exciting about this year, is really being able to network with the community members and see their excitement learning about Miss DC and Miss America and the way that they want to get engaged, and be able to really leverage appearances for myself in a way that I think before would have been really scary for me to imagine, just being that independent and stepping into a space with that sort of confidence and being able to share, here's what I have to offer as a Miss DC. But now I'm in a really great position, and it's really rewarding to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I know that as Miss DC, you're often sent off to events where you don't know anyone, you've never met anyone before. And I agree that can be daunting, especially at 18 years old. And now that you're older, you might be better prepared. What's your mindset, or what are your tips for going into those situations where you don't know anyone, but all eyes are on you, and it's really on you to network and make the connections that are available there?
Oh, that's a great question, because add to that, I'm still an introvert at the end of the day, which a lot of people don't know or don't realize about me. But I would always prefer to be around my small group of friends, kind of in the corner. Like, that's where I feel the best. So having to be the center of attention or the star is something that I'm kind of uncomfortable with. And so that actually what you're describing happened to me at an appearance when I was meeting the Real Housewives of Potomac, and I knew nobody there. I was standing in the line and just like had the crown on and walked in, but I actually made conversation with the folks in the line in front of me. And so I told them that they were going to be my friends for the rest of the event. And they were the folks that I hung out with. I got their contact. I followed them on Instagram. And there was a lot of folks that I met that day at Potomac that then I've met in subsequent parts of DC at other appearances. So I would always say, if you're going there, try to make at least one friend, see who you kind of vibe with, match energy with, and then let that person be your buddy for the event. And it'll become really fun.
That's great advice. And this is a little bit different, but it feels the same. Like being in consulting, I get sent to training sometimes, and I'm put in a room to network with a few hundred people, and I may not have met any of them, but I'm supposed to just go around and start making conversation. So in those situations, I do like to identify a buddy or make friends early on, and then you can kind of tag team it together, and it's a little bit less daunting. So that's really great advice. As Miss D.C, you're also a student, I believe, right? Are you a full-time student right now?
I am still full-time, and I'm writing my doctoral research this year too. So it's hectic. Yes.
Oh my gosh. And how do you do that time management wise? Because I know that a lot of us, right, we're students, we have our jobs, but we're also doing side hustles. We have so much that we're pursuing. As Miss DC, how are you balancing all of this?
So one of the things that I definitely have as Miss DC is 2 separate emails, and that just helps me to make sure that I'm able to read everything, keep track of everything, and keep things separate. So I know what's school and what's Miss DC. And I also usually try to like clock out what time I'm gonna like check both, just so I can be in a different state of mind completely. Also, something that is incredibly helpful is my iPhone, my calendar, making sure that I keep it updated in real time. Because again, like you said, there's a million things happening at once. months, and I need to be able to keep track of that. So those two things help keep me really organized. The other thing that I'm trying to do this year is I'm trying to journal more because, like you said, you only get 1 year to be Miss DC. I want to make the most of it and I want to remember it, but it happens and it flies by really quickly, especially when you're doing a million other things. So I'm also still trying to make some time for that mental piece of it to make sure I can really capture the year.
Speaking of journaling and memories, is there a most memorable moment so far that you can share?
Oh gosh, the first one that always comes to my mind is meeting the Real Housewives of Potomac.
Yeah.
And that's because I'm a huge Real Housewives of Potomac fan. Like, if anybody really follows me on social media, I'm always talking about the housewives and like my theories or my different things. And so getting to meet them was really exciting, especially Ashley. She is a former Miss DC, who we all got to meet. She's so cool, so lovable. And the rest of them are literally just as iconic in person as they are on TV.
Yeah. And I do not follow Real Housewives. I like not participate in the conversation. But I remember meeting Ashley for the first time around 2 years ago, and I didn't realize who she was. I knew she was a former Miss DC, but I didn't know she was a Real Housewife. So afterwards, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I was standing right next to her, and I had no idea."
Yeah, and then we had Giselle judge
Mhm.
Man of the District that year too. So
Yeah.
they're all really cool and down to earth, and I think that's also a really neat thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, going back to your being in school for psychology, I
Yes.
think part of this series is to really explore what our options are as young women professionally. What inspired you to kind of pursue the psychology route? What were the reasonings that led to that? Because this is a lot of school and work that you have committed to. So I commend you, but what was the reasoning behind it?
Well, my dad always told me that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And so I think when I talk about psychology, and hopefully your viewers, once I get going, they hear it, but I love what I do. And so it makes going to school, the extra hours, all of that more fun because I'm genuinely interested in it. So what began it, I think I'm an only child. I've always been interested in how people think, like why they do what they do, why is it different than what other people may do in the same situation. I was always just kind of curious about that, but didn't really kind of know like if there was a field for that or what you would do. So I always just said I would be a doctor. However, upon attending undergrad, I decided that I wanted to graduate a year early. And upon deciding to graduate a year early, I immediately decided to go with psych after taking my Psych 101 class because I loved it so much. So I declared a major and declared that I'd be graduating a year early, like all in one day, split second. But since then, I've absolutely adored it. And what sort of convinced me to continue to pursue it was my senior year. As most seniors are, we're sort of thinking like, what do we want to do with our life? What are the next steps? We're feeling really antsy. I was met with that. And most people, if you are a psych major, you know that you can't just end with the B in psych. You have to go to the next step. And being the senior that I was kind of nervous about what the next step looked like. I didn't know really what direction within psychology I wanted to do. But then my senior year, a class was offered, called homicide. And I'm really obsessed with serial killers and crime and like crime podcasts. And so I took the class and I loved it. I was emphatic about it. And I found out that there was a field called forensic psychology. And that's what led me to apply to GW and to move up to DC, was in beginning my master's in forensic psych. And so upon doing that, I really become passionate about learning more about the legal side of psychology, of where psychology and the law meet. Specifically, we're talking about assessments for juvenile cases, insanity pleas, literally all of your favorite crime stories that talk about assessments. That's literally what I do. And so it fills me with such joy and such passion because I get to see so many different sides of things. Of course, you hear the criminal perspective, but I also get to do assessments with U visa cases, immigration cases, victim assessments, school assessments. And then I get to do my work that I do with my patients, which is incredibly fulfilling because you get to see in real time the difference that you're making in a person's life. And so it's nice, like you said, having so many years of schooling and being almost done. It's nice that I'm finally at the place where I'm practicing what I've been learning for so long, and that I actually love it just as much as I thought it would. So it's incredibly rewarding.
That's incredible, Andolyn. And I forgot to even mention that you are kind of already a practicing psychologist. You have
Yes.
patients that you work with. And that's another thing to add onto the plate of everything that you have going on right now. So I really, really commend you. Through that, I mean, you kind of work in mental health, and I'm passionate about mental health from a suicide prevention standpoint. I'm sure that's difficult right now to take patients. I feel like this year, these past 2 years with COVID, with everything going on in the world, have been really challenging. Is that something that you've noticed as well, talking to your patients and take care of your own mental health when doing this for your patients?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking, and thank you for the work that you do regarding suicide and education and awareness, because it is really important. And one of the things that I know you are really sort of outspoken about is making sure people ask, that they check in, that they're, explicit about the ask. And that's definitely something as a therapist I can speak to. I was afraid. I thought when you're thinking about asking about suicide, it sounds really scary. However, the feedback, the education that I've gained through my years of training is that people want you to ask. If they're having suicidal thoughts, they genuinely want you to ask. They want there to be a conversation, and that's something that you speak on. And so I think that's important just for people to know. But yes, this year has been incredibly difficult, incredibly hard. My patients really struggled with their depression, their anxiety, feelings of safety, and the sort of the unknown. And usually there's some sense of stability of like, I genuinely know I can be safe and healthy. But a lot of that was pulled under the rug for a lot of people. And so it was really scary and really terrifying for my patients to go to that space. Also, I think, there was this saying at the beginning of the pandemic, stay at home, you're safe at home. And I think a lot of people took that and ran with it. But the reality is for a lot of people, they were not safe at home. I had patients that their home was not a safe space, that they were doing therapy out of their cars, that there were issues that they were talking about that they were terrified of their family members learning about. And so, not only were they dealing with the fear, the depression, the anxiety of a global pandemic, but they still had their own lives, their own sort of predetermined histories that were also coinciding with that. And to your point of asking about being a therapist during this year, well, I started my work as a therapist the fall before COVID hit. So during COVID was my first year practicing, and we went from going in person to a teletherapy model. We did not know how to do that. There was a lot of learning that happened expeditiously to get us competent enough to be able to practice. And then, it's different. It's different from the routine of being able to go to your therapist's office, sit in the room, be able to share that space with them, to like sitting in a box and you can't see my hands, you can't see a lot about me that as a therapist is like really important to attend to in the room. So it's difficult. And then you have the fact that a lot of times I can separate myself from the therapy session because I can attend to solely what my patient is talking about. But a lot of our therapy sessions were about the pandemic or about, the racial unrest that was happening during the pandemic as well. It was about things that I felt similarly affected by. So that's why they say every good therapist has a good therapist, so that I can have somebody else that I can talk about it with, so that my patients don't feel it. But it was definitely hard in the room, keeping a lot of those emotions underneath, while knowing that I felt very much so the same as my patients were feeling.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible to kind of keep it professional, even though we're all going through this together. I'm sure there's different things that are happening to each of us within this, but these big life events are happening to all of us. And sometimes we just want to talk like as a friend with someone. So great job, kind of your first year, keeping it professional and being really adaptable. I would say it sounds like you had to adapt from this assumption going into it that, okay, I'm going to be in person, I'm going to have my full body language to use with my patients. No, it's really just me on a screen. And there's that extra degree of separation that has made it a little bit harder for us to connect with people. But, we've made it work, obviously, as you can see. Yeah. So that's really incredible. What would you recommend to someone who wants to reach out, who wants to start therapy and talk to a professional? What are some good steps that they can take?
Well, I would definitely look at one of the best site for finding a therapist is psychologytoday.com. And that's really great because you can put in sort of your insurance, what you're specifically looking for, any specific identity traits that you want in your therapist, and they kind of sift through it and give you some concrete answers. Another answer, if you're in the DC area, is referring to GW Center Clinic, which is where I'm a therapist at. Just I would not take you in if I know you. So please make note of that if you do refer in, just so there's no sort of conflict. But we're a sliding scale clinic, and that's really great because we're able to serve the community. And we know that therapy is so expensive, and that's one of the barriers. So if you go to the GW Center Clinic, we are really flexible. We start at $5, and there are some other clinics that are available as well that I don't have off the top of my head, but if you at least can reach out to us, we could be able to provide you some resources for other therapists. Sorry.
Oh, good. Thanks so much, Andolyn. I hope some people take advantage of that, because I agree. Everybody should be in therapy if they can.
Well, yeah, and I think that's, I mean, a lot of people think you have to have something wrong with you to go to therapy. You really don't. It's just a matter of needing a space to be able to process and talk through some things. And, it's the same way you go to the doctor to get your annual checkup. You should be checking in on your mental health at all times. There's also ways in which I think people sometimes don't understand the ways their mental health is taking a toll on them. So a lot of people don't realize, sometimes if you're always having headaches or you're always complaining of stomach aches, we sometimes somaticize what is happening in our minds to be happening into our bodies. So there's a lot of things that people might not even be aware are related to their mental health that coming into a therapist could be really beneficial to get some insight on.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I want to make sure we get to this before we run out of time.
Okay.
But you are also a commissioned naval officer, and I understand that that's kind of something that runs in the family.
Yes.
So why did you choose to join the Navy, and how does that work with you being a psychology student? How does that pan out for you?
Well, I never thought I would join the Navy. Being the daughter of two naval officers, you see the good, bad, and the ugly. And so I was aware of that already going in. I thought I would serve for the Navy. I'm passionate about, children and families of military officers and military members. I thought I would do it in a civilian capacity, but not much so as a naval officer. And so my journey to that began upon applying to doctoral programs. And within getting accepted into GW, I learned about the Navy Health Profession Scholarship Program, HPSP for short, in which students from all across the country apply to one of the military branches programs within a specific doctorate. So you could have the medical HPSP, you have PsyD, HPSP, there's a dental HPSP. So we all apply, and then they pick, for my cohort, they only picked 5 out of the applicants. And so the application process is intense. You go through your physical for the military, you go through like a 1-hour interview with our Navy psychologist Best, where they ask you everything under the sun about, where you come from, what you know about the Navy, what kind of officer do you imagine yourself to be, and your sort of psychological and theoretical orientations. For me, that happened in my first year. So I knew relatively little about my orientations as a budding psychologist. But I was able to hold my own. And then after you go through all of your application process, you are sort of reviewed against the officer board, and they select in order who they think will be and will make a great naval officer and a naval psychologist. And so I was one of 5 selected for my cohort for the Navy. And what that means is that while I'm getting my doctorate in clinical psychology, the Navy is paying for the remainder of my tuition as well as a stipend. And then 45 days out of the year, I'm active duty and I serve. And then once I finish my my degree in 2023, I'm promoted to the rank of lieutenant, and I have to serve 4 years active duty. And then next year in 2022, I will move to Portsmouth, Virginia, where I will start serving as a naval psychologist within the Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth. So it's a lot.
That is a lot. That's amazing, though. That's a wild application process. It sounds incredibly competitive. What tips would you offer to someone, maybe not going through the exact same process, but something similar? What kind of helped you keep everything organized and get you over the finish line there?
again, making sure I had deadlines. I had sticky notes everywhere telling me when I needed to get things in and get it done. I would always say shoot to aim early. That way, if anything is incorrect or they don't receive something, you have enough time to fix it and you're not freaking out. The advice I received was actually from my recruiter, and it was the best advice I've received to date. He told me, because it was so competitive, he said, imagine that you were competing against your twin. Now do anything you would need to do to beat your twin. So imagine you're competing against yourself. What would it take to beat yourself? That's the mentality that I had to have going into it. And it taught me a lot, and really helped me to become really confident in myself, because I had to review my own information in a way that I felt like I could succinctly speak to it and beat myself if it came down to it.
That's tough. I'm thinking, would I break my twin's knee? I don't know what I would do to my fake twin, but that's really incredible and great advice. Actually, I like that. Compete against yourself. Yes. I feel like we say that in pageants too. Like you're not there to compare yourself to the other women or girls competing. You're really there to compare yourself to your previous self, or who else you could be at that competition. You're trying to be the best version. So I think I saw that in you when you were competing for Miss D.C. and I cannot wait to see you compete for Miss America in December. What is your mindset going into the upcoming Miss America competition?
Just honestly to make the most of it and to have fun. I mean, honestly, yes, I want to win. I want to make DC proud. But there's so much more to winning, or so many more ways to win than the crown. And so I'm really excited just to have the experience, to be able to meet the girls, to be able to have the opportunity, and going in there just hoping and praying that I'm ready for whatever life has in store. So, like you said, not going there to compete against anybody else but myself, and hoping that I can stay in a great space.
That's amazing. I'm going to be watching. I'm going to have the popcorn.
Yes.
It's the 100th anniversary, and Miss D.C. was the first Miss America 100 years ago. So I think that's a good omen.
I hope so. I'm feeling good vibes. I think you all are going to love the show. So far, I've loved everything that we've gotten to do as candidates, and I'm super excited for it. So I think you guys are going to be in for a great production. If nothing else, the other girls that are competing are incredible. So you guys are in regardless for an amazing Miss America, whoever wins.
Yes, I'm so excited. Whoever wins Miss America, she's going to have a great year ahead of her, but I know that you have a great year ahead of you no matter what happens. How can everybody keep up with you? Are you on social media? What's the best way for us to stay tuned on all things Andolyn?
Perfect. Yes. So for my private Instagram, it's where's.ondo. I say private, it is public, but it's just more about me. My Miss DC Instagram is at Miss America DC. And then if you want to see a little bit of both, you can check out my website, www.Andolyn Medina. And that's also where you can book me for any Miss DC appearances.
Amazing. Well, Andolyn, is there any final advice you'd like to give, just outside of, it doesn't have to be pageant related, doesn't have to be school related, just any advice you've learned over the years that would resonate with this group?
Well, something that I really try to live my life by is what's for you will not pass you. And so I would leave that with the viewers, really whatever God has in store, whatever life has in store is what's going to happen. And there's so many different ways to make an impact, to make change that go far beyond what we can even imagine for ourselves. So don't limit yourself, don't limit your opportunity. Just know that there's a million different ways you can still make an impact and make it happen.
Incredible. I love that advice. I agree completely. And I think we can leave it there. So thank you so much, Andolyn, for joining me for this episode. I really appreciate it. And I cannot wait to see you compete at Miss America. Best of luck.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.